Welcome to math class today. I am Mrs. Tonioli, and today we're going to be doing equations lesson number 9, where we are going to be writing equations from tables, the same thing that we did in our last lesson, but today we're going to go one step further and we're going to graph those equations on a coordinate plane. So our learning target today is to be able to analyze dependent and independent variables using graphs and tables and relate them to an equation. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start a little bit easy where here's our equation, y equals x plus 5. Remember that x is our input, y is our output, and the x plus 5 is our rule. So we already have our table filled out. So what we need to do now is learn how to graph that. Well, when we graph something, we need an ordered pair. In order to graph it, we need an x value and we need a y value. We already have an x and a y value in our table. When x is 2, y is 7. And so let's make that just a little bit bigger. When x is 2, y is 7. We write coordinates in parentheses with an apostrophe, a comma in between them, and the x first and the y second. So next over here, we have when x is 3, y is 8. So we have the coordinates of 3, 8. There we go. And over here, when x is 6, y is 11, so we have the coordinates 6, 11, and then we have the coordinates 8, 13. Let's see here, there we go. And then we have the coordinates 10, 15. All right, our coordinate plane over here doesn't go all the way up to 15, so we're just going to graph a couple of the points on here and show that it shows that relationship that's in our equation. So our first point is 2, 7. When x is 2, y is 7. So we're going to put a point on our graph when, remember, our x coordinate is the horizontal one and the y coordinate or y axis is the vertical one. So we have to the point 2, 7. When x is 2, y is 7. So we're going to put just a dot right there on 2, 7. When x is 3, y is 8. So I'm going to put a dot on the coordinate of 3, 8. And when x is 6, y is 11. Now 11 is a little bit off my graph, but I'm just going to estimate that it's right up here. These other y coordinates are up here beyond where my graph goes, so I'm just going to leave those off for right now. Now I am going to take a line and I'm going to connect my points here. You don't have to connect them, but I just like to because it shows the line that equation makes. Now, if I kept graphing points, my line would keep going on in this direction. And if I graphed points of x values less than 2, my line would continue to go on in this direction. So actually, we should probably have arrows on the end of those lines to show that my line would keep going. And that's really all there is to it as far as graphing an equation, is we just need to turn our x and y's into coordinates and then put them on the coordinate plane. So let's go to this next problem. This one's a little bit harder because in this case, well, we have our x's and y's, but it also is asking us to find the equation that goes along with our table. So first of all, let's just go ahead and write our ordered pairs because that's pretty easy. We have an x value and its corresponding y value. So when x is 5, y is 2 and 5/10. And when x is 6, y is 3. When x is 7, when x is 7, sorry about that. When x is 7, y is 3.5. And when x is 12, we're not quite sure what y is until we figure out our rule. So let's take a look, just like we did the other day, and let's see if we can figure out our pattern. So what are we doing to the x to get to the y? What am I doing to x to get to y? So I'm looking at 5 and 2.5. So it looks like 2.5 is half of 5. So I'm looking at 6 and 3. If I divide 6 by 2, I get 3. 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. So it looks like my rule is to divide by 2, x divided by 2, or x times 1/2. So I'm going to put my equation in right over here and say that I have x divided by 2, and that equals my y. Make that a little bigger so that we can see it. And that would be the equation that goes along with my graph or with my table. And so down here, I would put in half. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So my missing value would be 6. So in my coordinate, when x is 12, y is 6. Okay, now I have all of my coordinates, so I can go ahead and graph my points. So I have a point when x is 5, y is 2.5. So I'm going to go find my 5 on x, and then I'm going to find 2.5 on my graph and put my point there. When x is 6, y is 3. When x is 7, y is 3.5. And when x is 12, oh, that's way off my graph. So I'm not going to worry about that. I am going to insert my line here just to connect my points and show how my graph, my line, would continue to go on. If I were graphing more points, it would go in a straight, well, it's kind of diagonally straight line right here. If I put values in less than 5, then my line would go that way. So we graphed our equation and we wrote the equation that was that represents the information in the table. So we have our table and our equation and our graph, and all three of those are related to each other. So why don't you go ahead and put the video on pause and give this one a try and see if you can do it on your own, and then turn it back on and check your answers with me. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write an equation. So I'm trying to figure out how my x is related to my y. What did I have to do to the x to get to the y? So it looks like to get from 2 to 1, I could subtract 1. And that looks like that is the same rule for all of these, that I just need to subtract 1. So that means my missing number looks like it would be 10, because 11 take away 1 is 10. So I'm going to put in my missing number. I'm also going to put in my equation. It looks like I have x and I take away 1, and that will equal y. So there's the equation that would match my table. And now let's go ahead and put in our ordered pairs. When x is 2, y is 1. When x is 3, y is 2. When x is 7, y is 6. And when x is 11, y is 10. All right, now I have my coordinates. I can go ahead and graph those on my coordinate plane. So when x is 2, y is 1. So I'm going to put a dot right there. When x is 3, y is 2. When x is 7, y is 6. And x is 11 is off my grid, so I'm not going to worry about that. You can be done, or you can go ahead and connect your points to show what kind of line that equation would make. Later on, when you get into algebra, more algebra, you're going to be writing equations from lines. So sometimes it's helpful to realize that that equation does make a line, and that is the line that it would make. All right, here's another one. It's asking us to create an equation that represents this table and fill in the mixing box and to graph it. So let's go ahead and see if we can figure out our equation. How do I get from 5 down to 0? From 5 down to 0. So it looks like I could subtract 5, but that doesn't work here. I can't really divide 5 by anything and get 0. So that doesn't work very well. So if you remember yesterday, we looked at if I have two values, x values next to each other, then I can look at the y values and see what their difference is. And it looks like their difference is 2. So there's probably something going on with a 2 here. Probably I'm multiplying by 2. So let's take a look. If I take x and I times it by 2, I get 10. And then I would have to subtract 10 to get 0. 6 times 2 is 12. Subtract 10 is 2. 9 times 2 is 18. Subtract 10 is 8. So it looks like that is going to be my pattern. I times x by 2 and then I subtract 10 and that equals my y. So my equation would be 2x minus 10 equals y, or you could put y equals first, y equals 2x minus 10. So that means my missing number, if I times it by 2, I get 30, and I subtract 10, that gives me 20. So it looks like my missing value would be 20. Now let's go ahead and graph that. So when x is 5, oh, whoops, I guess I should let's type in our ordered pairs first. So when x is 5, y was 0. When x is 6, y was 2. When x is 9, y is 8. And when x is 15, y is 20. All right, and now I can go ahead and graph my points on the line. So when x is 5, y is 0. So that's going to be right down there on the x-axis. When x is 6, y is 2. And when x is 9, y is 8. Okay, this one is way off my graph, so I'm not going to worry about graphing that one. I'm going to connect my lines. If you don't have a straight line, if yours is squiggly, you've probably done something wrong. You should always end up with that good straight line right there. All right, sometimes the table is not given to you to help you graph the equation. You're just given the equation and then it says graph this. And so in order to do that, you need to make your own table and decide your own values that you want to put in for x. It's really helpful if you have at least 3 pairs of numbers. It's really easiest if you probably choose like 0, 1, 2, and 3, those very low numbers. Because they're easier to graph on the coordinate plane and generally easier to figure out. So we're given the equation right here, y equals 2x. So we would need to make our own table here and fill it out. So what if x is 0? So we're going to go back to what we learned about substitution and just substituting a value in for x. So that means 2 times x. So if x is 0, 2 times 0 is 0. So y would be 0, which means that my ordered pair would be 0, 0. 0, 0. There we go. Okay, if I put 1 in for x, 2 times 1 is 2, so my y value would be 2, which means that my ordered pairs, when x is 1, y is 2. And then if I put a 2 in for x, 2 times 2 is 4, so when x is 2, y is 4. So I'm going to not have a ton of space there, so I'm going to actually make this a little bit smaller. So when x is 2, y is 4. So that would mean that my coordinates are 2 and 4. When x is 3, 2 times 3 is 6. So my coordinates would be 2, 6. Now I can go ahead and graph those on the coordinate plane. So 0, 0 is going to be right down there at the origin. And then 1, 2, and 2, 4, and 3, 6. I'm going to go ahead and connect those with a line to show what line my equation would make. And like I said, it would continue to just go up like that if I continue to graph points. All right, go ahead and give this one a try. Put the video on pause and see if you can fill out the table on your own and then graph this equation. So y equals 3x plus 1. Give that a shot on your own. All right, if I put 0 in for x, 3 times 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. Y would equal 1, which would make my coordinates 0, 1. If I put a 1 in for x, I have 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. So my y coordinate would be 4, and then my coordinates, when x is 1, y is 4. When we put 2 in, 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So my coordinates then would be 2, 7. And when I put 3 in, 3 times 3 is 9 plus 1 is 10. So my coordinates would be 3, 10. And then I can go ahead and graph those. So 0, 1 is right there on the y-axis, 1, 4, 2, 7, and 3, 10. I'm going to connect those with a line so that I can show what line my equation makes. And there we go. We have just graphed this equation. We had to make a table first to figure out when x is this value, y is this value, but we were able to graph that equation. Okay, go ahead and put this on pause and try this one right here, and then come back and check your answers. So we're already given the equation y equals x minus 2. So we already know the rule. It's just a matter of substituting values in for x. So if I put 2 in for x, 2 minus 2 is 0. So y would be 0, and my ordered pair would be 2, 0. If I put 3 in, I get 3 minus 2, which is 1. So my ordered pair would be 3, 1. If I put 4 in for x, I get 4 minus 2 is 2. So my ordered pair is going to be 4, 2. If I put 5 in, I get 5 minus 2, which is 3. So my y value would be 3, and my coordinates would be 5, 3. Okay, let's go ahead and graph those. So 2, 0 is right there on the x-axis. 3, 1, 4, 2, and 5, 3. Let's connect those to show our line. And there we have it. We have graphed the equation y equals x minus 2. That's what it looks like on a coordinate plane. All right, this one is slightly different. We're given the equation y equals 3x minus 5, but this time we don't have any x values, so we need to decide which x values we want to put in ourselves. Now we need to be a little bit careful here because normally I would put 0, 1, 2, 3. But if I put 0 in here, I'm going to end up with a negative number because I'm going to have 3 times 0, 0 minus 5 is negative 5. And that's fine. We could do that, except that we only have quadrant 1 of our coordinate plane. And so because we don't have any other quadrants available to us on here, I don't want to end up with negative numbers. So I'm going to start with a 2 because that's the smallest number I can put in that is still going to give me a positive outcome. So I'm going to put my x values as 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So if I put 2 in for x, 3 times 2 is 6 minus 5 is 1. So my ordered pair would be 2, 1. If I put 3 in, I get 6 minus 9 minus 5, which is 4. So my coordinate pair would be 3, 4. If I put 4 in, I get 12 minus 5, which is 7. So I have 4, 7 as my coordinates. And if I put 5 in, I get 15 minus 5, which is 10. So my coordinates would be 5, 10. Now these will all fit on my coordinate plane nicely. So I'm going to graph them. My point at 2, 1, and 3, 4, and 4, 7, and 5, 10. I'm going to connect my lines so I can see what it would look like. So if it kept going down here on this end, you can see that it would go into the other quadrants, and that's where those negative numbers would go. We just don't have that available to us to graph it. It can be done though. All right, so why don't you give this one a try? Put the video on pause and try this one by yourself. Make sure that I would probably choose X values like 0, 1, 2, and 3 because those make it a little bit easier. Okay, so let's put those X values that we're going to use in our table. And then let's find what our Y values would be by using substitution. So if I put 0 in, 0 plus 3.5 is 3.5, which gives me an ordered pair of 0, 3.5. If I put a 1 in, 1 plus 3.5 is 4.5. So it would give me coordinates of 1, 4.5. Oops. If I put a 2 in, 2 plus 3.5 gives me 5.5. So it gives me coordinates of 2 and 5.5. And if I put a 3 in, 3 plus 3.5 gives me 6.5. So I get to graph 3, 6.5. Okay, now it's just a matter of putting my points, plotting my points, and drawing my line. So 0, 3.5 would be right there. 1, 4.5 would be right there, and right there, and right there. And then I can go ahead and connect those to show what my equation makes. Right there. Okay, same thing on this one, except that we have a 2.5. So again, I would put for my X values probably 0, 1, 2, and 3. You can be more creative if you want to be, but that's probably the easiest thing to do. So go ahead and try that on your own and then come back and check your answers. Okay, I'm going to put those in for my X values, so that would make my Y values. 0 plus 2.5 is 2.5. So my ordered pair then is 0, 2.5. If I put 1 in, 1 plus 2.5 is 3.5. So 1 and 3.5. And then if I put 2 in, I get 4.5. And if I put 3 in, I get 5.5. So 3 and 5.5. Okay, now I can go ahead and graph those points on the line. So 0 and 2.5, 1 and 3.5, 2 and 4.5, and 3 and 5.5. Connect those to show our line. And there we go. All right, hopefully that helps and you are now able to graph your equations and give that a shot on your independent practice today. Good luck.